Hello again. So in this video, as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking about hand positions for casting. While the alginate can pick up lifelike detail, the plaster can trap air in certain parts, usually fingertips, and end up not fully casting. So if you're not thoughtful about the position that your hand is in or aware when you go to cast, you can end up with fingertips that are missing, and it can look kind of weird and a little funny. And if that happens, it's going to be okay. It's part of the learning process and we'll work with what we have. But hopefully you will use some of the tips or tricks that I'm going to show you so that you can avoid missing fingertips in your castings. And it happens a lot, and it even still happens to me when I'm making castings that I think that I've avoided any necessary extra steps, and then I remove the casting and I realize I should have vented something. So what you'll be doing, just a quick walkthrough, is you have your 2-liter soda bottle, you have your alginate. You'll mix up the alginate, you'll pour this sort of gooey stuff in here, and you'll put your hand inside of that, and then you'll let it set. It's usually about 5 or so minutes. And once it sets, you wiggle your hand out because the alginate's kind of like Jello, so it's not hardened and stiff. And you'll have a hollow space where your hand was, that is your cavity or your negative space, and you're going to take plaster and you're going to fill it into that cavity. So it's that cavity that we want to kind of pay attention to. What is the shape that we are making in the cavity? So usually if you have a shape that is, this is my hand, if your hand is straight up and down, you are going to be just fine when you go to, if we pretend this is hollow and you pour plaster in here, what happens is air goes in with the plaster. The air ends up at your fingertips, but because there's a way for the air to go straight back up, it will go back up in the form of bubbles and it'll come back to the surface. We'll also be doing a little bit of tapping, and that will help the air bubbles rise. So if you have straight up and down, air will go in, but it also can come out. If you have a hook or anything above the lowest part of your casting, what's going to happen is air is going to go down and it's going to come up and get trapped in these little fingers. And when you go to tap out the air, it's going to rise to the surface of your fingertips, not back out this way. So there's a couple ways you can mitigate that by venting it, and I'll talk about that in a second. But just for some more kind of clear examples of some different hand castings, this is my hand. I wasn't sure if it was my hand or a student's hand. But this is an example of a hand that has a little bit more of a dynamic shape. It's not just straight up and down and rigid. It's kind of got a little curve to it, but that curve, the little curve there, is not lower or not higher than that sort of lowest spot. So the air was able to come down through here and then rise back up around the back edge. So I got pretty lucky. I don't think I vented this one in that it cast all the way. Fingers that are open versus fingers that are closed are also a little bit more vulnerable to breaking, especially when you remove them from the mold. And I've broken plenty of fingers as well, so we'll deal with those when they come. So if you want like a guarantee, well, I shouldn't say a guaranteed, but if you want a better chance at having a successful hand casting, I suggest maybe something that's just a slightly curved. Maybe it's like a giving or a receiving hand, fingertips closed, and that's it. You're gonna, get probably a pretty good casting. But you can be a little bit more dynamic and be just fine. So this hand is an example where these two fingertips, especially this one here, it's kind of hard to see behind it, but it curls up and it's higher than the lowest point. at least on the inside. And so I vented it. So what I'm talking about when I'm venting is I'm giving a place for the air to escape. Now that's what the bamboo skewers were for in your kit. What you can do is when your hand is in the alginate and you know that you made these little hooked fingers, these fingers are you're not quite sure and you just want to be on the safe side, you can go ahead and put a skewer right at the tip of that finger. So I could put a skewer right on the tip of my finger. I'd want to make sure I could feel it inside the mold with the alginate, and I would let this skewer, this bamboo skewer, set up with the alginate and with my hand. And when it was time to remove my hand, I would wiggle my hand free and then slowly wiggle this free. Now this also created a hollow channel, and hopefully if I got a good connection with it between my pinky and the bamboo skewer, that will allow the air to flow up and out through the top. And you'll end up with a little bit of plaster, but usually it snaps off fairly easily. So in this particular hand casting, just to be on the safe side, I used 2 bamboo skewers on my pinky and my ring finger. And I don't know that you can really see this, but there are 2 little dots that indicate that's where the skewers were, and I could work to clean that up. But it essentially looked something like that and like that. So I just had 1 skewer on top of each of those fingers. And again, they don't hurt. So if you're unsure, you could go ahead and stick one of the bamboo skewers in. There's another cool trick to pay attention to, and I don't know if any of you thought of this when you were looking at this hand, but this pointer finger definitely would be in the category of one that needs venting, because the top of it is higher than that sort of middle section, the lowest part of it. And so in theory, it seems like it should need a vent, but I connected it to my thumb. So my thumb and my pointer finger were touching, and that creates a channel for the plaster to escape, or the air to escape. So the air comes down, it gets trapped here, but then it can find its way back up and out. So that's another kind of cool trick that you can do, is use your hand to create its own sort of natural vent. So those are just some things to consider as you're getting ready to cast. What is the position that I want my hand in? How much am I willing to risk failure by missing fingers or broken appendages? And really, I'm just looking for you to get the experience in casting and to try following all the steps as best you can to see what the results are that you will get. And some of you will be successful, and some of you might have partial success, and others might end up with something that looks like a blob. We'll work with whatever we get. Okay, next video will be about doing the actual casting. So you'll want to gather the rest of your supplies and get ready to watch this next video.